Welcome to the Making Sense of Martech podcast. I'm Jacqueline Friedman.
And I'm Juan Mendoza.
And this is Office Hours. And we cut through the noise and discuss the latest and greatest in the Martech landscape. So, opening thoughts. We're officially back from Martech World Forum, New York. We are done for the year. What were your thoughts at the penultimate of the season?
I love
the penultimate. Is that the right word?
Well, it would be the penultimate is the second largest.
Never mind. Well, it could be to next year. But for the ultimate event of the season, how do we feel?
I feel great, Jacqueline. Martech World Forum New York City has been our biggest event we've ever done in all metrics. We sold out both of sponsorships and also attendee passes. Just brilliant. Martech World Forum has been an amazing conference series. New York City has been the first time we've been there this year, and just a very warm, welcoming reception. It definitely feels like across North America that New York is definitely the place for marketing technology professionals. I would say it's the best place in the world to be doing business in Martech. And I'll tell you one reason why.
Just in the world in general.
It is. I am convinced of that now. Look, I am like, New York has my heart at this point. It is an amazing city for doing business in Martech. And I'll tell you why. We have a lot of global brands in New York. There is a lot of companies that are either from overseas headquartering in the United States, and often they will headquarter in New York. You have a very strong retail presence, finance, healthcare. You got all those sort of core verticals that the large consumer base sort of requires. And then you just have a lot of companies that just have the categories for Martech. In comparison to, say, the West Coast and Silicon Valley, Martech is not Martech. It's engineering and its product. And it's a very different world, a different taxonomy and terminologies for how Martech is actually communicated. But in New York, on the East Coast, we do have heads of Martech. We do have global marketing technology managers. We have these people that straddle both IT and marketing in a really effective way. And so I was just blown away by just the incredible global brands that were with us, from Disney all the way through to Pfizer, to just amazing speakers as well. But I'm going to throw it back to you, Jacqueline. What were your favorite sessions?
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of Tony Byrne. I mean, goes without saying, loved his forward-thinking, forward-looking kind of 2030 planning. It's kind of the visionary component that being stuck in the weeds, you don't really get to think about. And so I was just grateful to have, one, a legend, but two, someone on stage to really just reflect upon where we're at today, where we could be tomorrow and the next 5 years.
Yeah.
What was your favorite session?
Well, I have 3 favorite sessions. One was a bit like, I'm not too sure.
Well, that's cheating.
But I'll give you 3 quick ones. So Scott Brinker, as always, a good friend of our business, the person behind the Martech landscape super graphic with 16,000 different tools on it.
Go check it out.
Go check it out. They've just done their latest update, but Scott gave us a good preview and a teaser. But his talk was all about AI and how consumer experiences are changing with AI. And he did a very interesting, slightly awkward presentation on trying to buy something from his former employer, HubSpot.
Oopsies.
It's hilarious. And I think that, like, he showed, like, okay, here's HubSpot's AI customer service experience, right? Help me find the right plan versus using like Claude. And it was literally chalk and cheese. You know, the experience you can get with an LLM that is generic of everything versus a inbuilt platform that's focused just on HubSpot data is, very, very different. So I thought that was like a cool, also kind of awkward because he used to work at HubSpot, that it was very fun kind of experience. My next one was Chris Marriott. You know, Chris Marriott, he's been very experienced in the email space and the marketing automation platform space. And he kind of challenged the audience to think through, do you even need a CDP? And, you know, he's hearing things that I'm also hearing out in the market where a lot of brands are like, we've got MoEngage or Iterable or Braze. Can't they just be our customer engagement platform? And he made an argument for it. I'm not sure how many people actually agreed with that argument, but I thought that was a good sort of challenge to go, well, what's the role of the CDP? His whole talk was about the CDP is basically in the old folks' home at this point. But I would say that for an enterprise company relying just on a customer engagement platform for all your data orchestration, identity, activation, probably not the best idea. But I can see kind of where he's coming from as well, which is like smaller companies potentially will just use an engagement platform because it's more efficient. But the bigger the company, the more complex the data orchestration, and even just tapping into things like composability and the data warehouse and the cloud, things like that. There's a good argument to say that a CDP still have a very important role there. So that's Chris Marriott. Very controversial, I would say. My last one was actually just a quote from Bree Graham. So she's the head of Martech for Block. So Block is the holding company for 3 really important apps: Square, Cash App, and Afterpay. So it's a sort of an innovative financial infrastructure company. And she manages marketing technology across multiple business units. And And she said this, which really resonated with me. And it kind of felt like it was the theme from the event. She said that when technology serves people, marketing becomes not just smarter, but also more human. That's when it truly works. And multiple sessions, especially from the brand side leaders, that this theme continue to come out, which is how do we make our customer experiences more human? How does technology enable more authentic and human experiences? And I think part of that is a reaction from a lot of the AI slop we're seeing out in the market. You know, a lot of people using AI tools to buy things, so there's less humans in the equation. You know, there's this really interesting focus on how do we make these experiences more human, more connected to the human experience and not less. And so I thought that was really great.
Agreed. I'm a big fan of anything Brie has to say. But I kind of want to turn some things upside down for a moment and talk about Stranger Things, because there's actually some marketing components that are worth discussing. That is both physical, tangible, as well as co-marketing, co-branding. They've really turned it up a notch for the final season. I'm curious to hear, are you caught up?
I am now caught up, Jacqueline. I know that you are a mega fan. I had no idea that you were such a huge fan of Stranger Things. A few weeks ago, we were in New York City. Just after the event, you went and saw the, I think it's like the prequel musical.
Yes. Stranger Things, the first
Yeah.
Yes, no spoilers, but you should go see it. Even if you're not a big play person, Broadway person, if you are a fan of the show, it is basically a movie on stage, as in the special effects. They won a bunch of Tonys for a reason. It was that incredible. And also you get a couple of snippets and really the background story to one of the primary characters, and really try not to have any spoilers at all if one has not caught up on Stranger Things or watched anything as it relates to Stranger Things. But it's worth a watch, even if you just watch a video that kind of highlights the main narrative. There's some key insights that are really beneficial. But I hear you have a favorite co-marketing, co-branding moment that the Stranger Things franchise has completed. Which one is that?
That's a great question. So KFC, they have partnered up with Netflix, and Netflix are doing this really interesting, like beyond just programmatic advertising on their platform, like actual brand activations, which is really interesting. I saw something similar earlier this year with Squid Game 2, the next sort of iteration. They did a very tight collaboration with McDonald's, where McDonald's did this sort of branded campaign. You can get all these different sort of Happy Meals, all kinds of stuff related to Squid Games. And KFC have gone in that way as well. And they created this like upside down burger, you know, so the chicken's on the outside and the burger bun's on the inside, and it's all, you know, it looks a bit creepy. But the advertising placements are quite fun, you know. So I deliberately take the cheap version of Netflix, not because I'm cheap, but because I'm interested in the ad placements, particularly around some of these bigger shows. You know, Stranger Things is one of the biggest shows that Netflix has ever produced. It's getting a lot of kudos from the market because it's one of the only shows they've produced and have actually almost finished. You know, so they haven't killed it because of some algorithmic
Also,
ranking. Yep.
marketed it. To some, I could see it being completely over marketed because, yes, it is. However, I am proud of Netflix to actually see their marketing strategy and prowess come to fruition, as opposed to just putting it on the home screen and moving on to the next. And so it's nice just to see it be a really holistic big campaign. So kudos to the Netflix team and powers that be in the agencies that were involved, because it's been fun as both a fan, but also as someone who analyzes the market, it really experienced and witnessed. Yeah. But there was one topic at MWF that didn't happen at the event. It was in the late night hours and the in-betweens that the team and I had a lot of conversations about. That is WTF is woo-woo. I'm curious, first, Juan, what was your response when we asked you what is
what is that? That was my response.
the interesting thing is no one knew what it was. And to be fair, it's not exactly properly defined, but my definition is it's something to do with mystical and spiritual thinking, and I think a lot of it has to do with intuition. And all of us recognized what woo-woo was once we defined it together. But I'm curious, Juan, do you see marketing often as woo-woo? I see it as magic within.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like marketing is always an intuition-based discipline. You know, you can't run everything just off data, just off analytics. It's not an operational part of the business either. I actually would say that there is a pretty big spiritual component to marketing. You're connecting with people. You're talking to people, right? And it's psychological. I would say I'm a spiritual person. I believe that there's spiritual things going on, you know, just as a disclaimer here. But I would say that, yeah, woo-woo. I don't know if I'd use the term woo-woo, but there is
But it's way fun to say woo-woo.
I would say that intuition really matters. A spiritual connection. Like most
Agreed.
people are religious in this world, right? Like the majority of billions and billions of people in this world are religious, or they believe in some sort of spiritual reality, right? It's not. We don't live in a agnostic or an atheistic world. We live in a spiritual and religious world. I mean, I think marketing should tap into that more. I think that there is intuition. There's a
Depends.
spiritual discernment that happens. Sometimes there can be
Yeah.
mystical things that happen, but even our own marketing, we see people connect with our message or connect with our own campaigns, or the right partners come along at the right time. And often those things are not things that you can really discern with just data. It's also deeply relational marketing as well. It's the team and how it works together, the partners that they have, their integration with the rest of the business. There's all these relational things happening as well. So if you want to put that all under the umbrella of marketing woo woo, be my guest, but I would probably choose a different word.
Woo is the right word. And it's way more fun to say, aka the marketing and the brand of it are more fun. But let's get to more serious conversations. We were on stage at MWF and the news came in at that, this is right before Thanksgiving, that Adobe acquired Semrush. Semrush had recently acquired Third Door Media, which is also martech.org. And I know you have a lot more context and experience with all of these different platforms and organizations. I'm curious what your thoughts are on both this decision and also really the history of all these different acquisitions, because it's kind of a snowball ultimately.
Yeah, it is. It's an interesting acquisition, totally out of left field. Caught me by surprise. One of the analysts at MWF actually told me about it at 7:30 in the morning as they turned up to set up their expo space. They said, "Hey."
That is the piping hot tea.
Yeah, that is literally piping hot, straight out of the kettle. But my first reaction to it was like, what? That makes no sense. And then I dug a little bit deeper, and I can talk a little bit about Third Door Media as well. But I want to give you some stats, and then I'm going to talk to what this could actually mean. So the first stat is that the price tag of $1.9 billion is almost twice the valuation of Semrush in its pre-deal market capitalization. So Semrush was valued at $1 billion. This is double, right? So this is Adobe taking a big risk,
For sure.
well above the asking price. Another stat is that this is one of Adobe's largest purchases. So it only comes second to Marketo, and Marketo was just shy of $5 billion acquisition. So there is also the Figma acquisition that would have been quite large as well,
Would have been.
but
Yeah.
never
I'm
happened.
glad they got to be
Yeah,
independent.
that's right. There's also another platform called Macro Media that was acquired a long time ago for $3.4 billion, right? So that's 20 years ago.
I haven't heard that company name in a very
Yeah.
long time.
So, but it ranks. It's in
I don't know if it's
it's
still
in the top
around.
3. Semrush. So which is kind of interesting, right?
Big deal for Adobe.
It's a big deal for Adobe, but not the biggest deal. And if you think about how big Adobe was back in 2005, they were making bigger acquisitions then than now, right? So it's not a massive thing, but still it's quite significant. One of the stats that Adobe put together to justify this investment was that they're seeing that a 1,200% year-on-year increase in website traffics to US retailers. So Adobe kind of sees this, and this is kind of where I think what's happening. And my umbrella for this is that Adobe blinked. Adobe saw the increase of LLM driven website traffic, how websites are now very quickly pivoting to being able to integrate with LLMs. And SEMrush sits in a very interesting space. They are not a generative engine optimization startup. They're not an LLM, but they do have probably the best source of data in the world for website traffic and what ranks. I would say that it's not necessarily an AI play. It's more of a data play. I would say
100%.
SEMrush, this opportunity for them has come at right at the right time, because the transformation that they have to do to keep up with GEO is significant. Yes, they have the data, but can they actually pivot to be able to offer a service that can integrate with LLMs? There are plenty of new startups with new approaches, fresh VC funding getting into this space, generative engine optimization. But I would say Adobe here this is what they're trying to do. They're trying to collect that data. They know that the more data that they can collect, the more rich media they can collect, the more value it is to marketers. And so I think that's kind of the big play there.
Also, if you take it into context of what Adobe is purchasing, and also the fact that they cannot afford to lose at this point because they can't have someone else own these discovery layers and this data, because they'll be left behind even more than they already are, which we can get to the earnings after this. of our conversation, but I would love to hear more about all the different media companies they've purchased and maybe if there's something interesting as it relates to Martech Weekly involved.
Yep. So I personally know that Semrush were trying to acquire many media publications, marketing and media publications, so multiple podcasts. Third Door Media owns several quite large media organizations in search and in Martech and many other areas. But I think the strategy there was post ChatGPT, there was this, whoever owns this data will be the winner. Not necessarily just the access. So anyone that owns the data, that owns that media will have a more valuable place in the market. And that was Semrush's doing. They were literally in a rush to acquire media. And Third Door Media is an interesting one. I mean, they have several large organizations. We've had some run-ins with those guys as well, but I think that acquisition at that time when Semrush actually took over Third Door Media, we were like, what is this going to be about? Is Martech.org just going to be another Semrush marketing rag? We were, and over time, I think that, Third Door Media have done an okay job, not a great job of trying to preserve their editorial integrity. But at the same time, you've got this small fish that's been acquired by a medium-sized fish, and now the big fish, Adobe's acquired all three, and so you look at it and you're like, okay, there's some serious content consolidation going on here. But the content
makes me wonder about the Mercury levels.
yeah. I got to watch out for that, I think. But, in this whole ecosystem, the media is being consolidated into the technology. And the technology platforms are wanting to own more media, which tells you a lot about the direction of LLMs and AI, is that the value is not necessarily the models, but the data. And I think this is what this whole acquisition is about. Adobe blinked. They have been on a year-to-date decline of 25 to 29% this year in their stock price. So the value of the company has been declining all year. This has not been a growth story for Adobe. But I think they've blinked and gone, actually, where we need to invest, where the growth opportunity is collecting as much rich data as possible to enable LLM optimization, integration with LLMs, personalization within LLMs, enabling companies to obviously optimize for their own LLM experiences on their own websites. So I think that's what's going on. My initial reaction was, what is this? This is so random. But now I think it kind of makes sense here.
It still feels a bit random, mainly because of the recent history of all the different acquisitions within Semrush. It's an interesting choice and also a really good tie-in to the next conversation we're going to have about quarterly Martech earning. From a growth divergence perspective, it's really interesting in terms of where mid-market marketing automation platforms are outperforming enterprise clouds, really the new players to the old players. So Braze was up 24%, Klaviyo was up 32%, and HubSpot was up 21%, versus old guard, Salesforce was up 8%. Adobe, similar to kind of what you're talking about, it's been declining. It's only up 11%. And then Sprinkler, if we're going to be broad to the Martech category, was up 8%. What was super interesting across all of the earnings calls and reports was AI washing. Imagine that. I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Yep. Obviously, we are in the season of AI getting into all the earnings calls that are happening. Q2 was a good reflection of that. I'll give you a few stats. Adobe, they mentioned AI 200 times in their earnings call, but they did not disclose any revenue from AI products.
Like they need an AI.
That to me, Jacqueline, would be a really good definition of woo-woo, where you're talking all about all this stuff, but then you actually got nothing behind it. And similarly with Salesforce, the massive Agentforce narrative, the way they're trying to influence the market with their Agentforce positioning, but less than 5% of revenue is coming from AI. Very small part of the market. HubSpot, Klaviyo, and Braze, all in those earnings calls and in the reports, AI features are largely free or unmonetized at this point. As a user of HubSpot, I am starting to see that they're actually getting some stuff right now with AI. There are some features that we are actually using daily, but it's been, 3 years, and we're really just starting to see some features that we're using and then we might actually pay for. Don't tell a HubSpot account rep about that, please. I think that this sort of AI washing, the younger is coming for the older. Obviously, Salesforce and Adobe and Martech are the top end of town. And then you've got all the hungry ones in the middle of the market, the Brazes, the Klaviyos, the HubSpots. These are all publicly listed companies that are trying to go after that business. But I would say here that, both Salesforce and and Adobe, another massive call out here was that both of those companies are relying on renewals. So their growth is actually based
Yes,
on renewals, not on new customer acquisition.
it
Yeah.
has
Whereas
been.
it's actually the opposite for HubSpot, Klaviyo, and Braze. All their growth is coming from new customer acquisitions, I should say. So you can see here there's this interesting narrative, Salesforce and Adobe investing big into AI, but not seeing the revenue. The whole market's looking like that around Martech at the moment. But at the same time, you've got this angle, which is, well, the smaller are kind of coming for the older, right? The companies that are coming up are
Yeah,
starting to take a lot of that business away. And I'm here for it. I think the days of the marketing
need
suite
it.
are kind of over. I think it was over 5 years ago, to be completely honest with you. And relying on a one vendor for your entire marketing tech stack, there's not only one point of failure, one risk point. It's
Exactly.
also, do you really want, as a enterprise marketer, do you really want to say, no, customer, we can't build that experience for you because it's not on Salesforce or Adobe's roadmap? Whereas the younger players, they're more malleable, right? You can go to a Braze or a Klaviyo,
They're
yeah, and you can
hungrier.
go to them and say, hey, we want this for our customer, and they will actually make ways to build that, without the huge overheads. It's more modular, it's
Comparatively,
more fractionalized.
your
Yeah,
voice is much more likely to be heard.
yeah.
That said, there are some interesting components. Granted, these are all publicly traded companies, and we, of course, speak to a lot of private companies in terms of the internal culture of some folks where they are hungry and want to acquire more customers by innovating, versus some are also taking the dinosaur approach of, nope, we want to acquire folks, but we also want to maintain and just keep adding and upselling internally. And so it's very interesting as we think through ARR, all the different components of who will come out ahead here, because there's definitely some trends, more to come.
I definitely think there's more to come here. We are right in the middle of the forest of AI. We're not in it, we're not out of it. I think there's going to be another 2 years here to see who the real winners are, but we're starting to see some signals, I think, and I think it's quite exciting. But let's move on to Black Friday, Cyber Monday. This wouldn't be a Martech podcast
Yes.
without touching on the biggest sales and marketing event of the year. If you are listening to this and you've just come off BFCM, you're a retail marketer or e-commerce or direct to consumer.
Hope you get a
Yeah,
break. Please take
yeah.
vacation. I'm
I,
so
you know, I,
sorry.
I just want to say right off the bat, I'm sorry that happened to you. I'm sorry that subject line was a mistake. I'm sorry that whatever your CMO's over the top of your shoulder, constantly looking at the dashboard and screaming at you all weekend. It is such a massive event for marketing. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a summary of what we got more of this year in comparison to last year and what we got less of. We are still getting some numbers out. So as of recording this, we are recording this on Cyber Monday in the US. So the numbers are still coming up.
Preliminary
We do have some
numbers.
preliminary numbers, and our next office hours will do some more concrete numbers. But I want to give you what's more and what's less. And then, Jacqueline, I want you to give us some analysis, because I think that, you have been in the middle of BFCM way more than I have been, and you have seen it. You've worked with marketers all over the world who have really been in the middle of building their Black Friday, Cyber Monday strategies. So let me give you the more and the less. Okay. So more. There's more in-store retail this Black Friday. There's more mobile shopping and more acquisition of customer through mobile. More buy now, pay later. More AI, so more AI to influence the shopping experience. Longer promotional curves, so starting well before Black Friday, the promotion starting, and then well after as well. And then some anecdotal data we're getting, and again, this is pretty fresh, that the amount of email campaigns that are going out is double at some brands. Some of them could be even triple. So more email, more direct channels going out. That's the more, okay? More retail, more mobile, more BNPL, more AI, longer promotional curves, and then more email. That's more. What's less? Less reliance on big discounts this year. So the discounts have not been as big as in comparison to previous years. And e-commerce has cooled from 14% to 10%. So we've had more in-store retail and less e-commerce, but it's only a very small amount. It's not huge variances.
It only grew 10% versus last year it grew
Yeah.
14%. It still grew a lot. I would just state like it cooled a little bit less in terms of the growth
Yes,
curve.
that's right. So e-commerce, as well, the other side of this is that e-commerce and retail are at parity now. Black Friday, Cyber Monday has really shown that we're really on equal footing, and e-commerce every year has been growing in its total market share of transactions. And now we're kind of at parity, right? It's an interesting sort of balance there. We're seeing more in-store retail, but e-commerce has continued to grow as well. But it's a very interesting sort of set of numbers there. But what's your take on all of this?
It's both surprising and unsurprising. So the emphasis of, for example, Klarna, they told us that there was 45% increase year over year from this year from last year about how folks are using buy now, pay later, which just further exemplifies where the economy is at, and not getting political or anything like that, but just in general, budgets are tighter. And so it's going to be very interesting to see what the overall spend for Black Friday, Cyber Monday will be when we get further estimates. Granted, we're still in the midst of it, being Cyber Monday still here in States, that there were a few key metrics that have come about from Black Friday that are just worth highlighting and recognizing. So just Black Friday alone, that day, there's been a 9% increase last year to this year. And what I found super fascinating was there were 67 million shoppers for Small Business Saturday. I think there was just an enormous increase and record-setting here for folks wanting to buy local as opposed to buy at a big box store. I had to describe what a doorbuster was to Juan during this call, which was very entertaining, I have to say. And, and so speaking of, the total number of sales so far has increased 4%. And so we've got a lot of things happening. And you said there were more in-store sales. Yes, but it wasn't by much. It was only 1.7%. So yes, it was more, but compared to the over 10% growth for e-commerce, it's very minimal. And I think we've kind of met the peak for retail in person. And so it's worth noting, yes, that in-store experience is important, but I don't think it's going to get that much more interesting, regardless of your doorbusters. And for those who don't know what that is, it's like a special discount or freebie that you get if you're within the first 100 people who show up. It's really just to get foot traffic. But I think the most interesting component of this year and really encapsulates where we are as both world, economy, AI, trajectory, you name it. In just 1 year, Black Friday shifted from really being mobile first to mobile and AI mediated, or AI. This year alone, the mobile share of online purchases this year climbed to 59%. And so that is a huge surge of several 100% year over year, with about half of US shoppers tapping AI to find and evaluate deals. I personally didn't do that because I knew exactly what I wanted and from whom. And I see Black Friday, Cyber Monday as a really great time to stock up on the basics that you already know and love, but at a better price, versus getting at new things. That's everyone is different, but it looks to be for next year, the main takeaway is actually, how do you want to optimize between, Adobe purchasing Semrush and the GEO part of the world really coming to the forefront, the profounds, you name it. How are we marrying AI and mobile and understanding that's the new default? And is that actually going to eventually replace the e-com facing store you have, your website? There's a lot of question marks. I have a lot of thoughts on interfaces and things like that, but it is just a really important thing to note that there's a lot more that happened this year, but that's the newest and the most fascinating and uncharted territory. Just another thing to add to marketers' lists of channels and things to do.
Yeah.
But I'm intrigued to see how this evolves, and as we get more numbers, what we can learn from it. Well,
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it is such a bellwether for retail, and it sets the trend for where retailers invest next year as well. Where it comes from. But if I'm hearing you right, I think the two big insights from this would be that omni-channel is not negotiable; it's required. We have parity now, right? Like, I still talk to a lot of retailers, and believe me, some of the biggest fashion retailers in the world, they still say to me that their e-commerce app or the website is still seen as another store. And that separates that company out into like, okay, the stores get these investments and then you get this investment. That's just the wrong way of thinking about it. It's omni-channel. It's not another store. It's a substrate which every customer purchases. Yeah.
Unit.
So omni-channel is one of those things where the big retailers, they have to continue to invest in. And this data points actually validate that. And the second point is exactly what you said, Jacqueline, is that using ChatGPT, using different search engines, using LLMs is becoming the way people buy things now. And you have to be really prepared for that. And this is very much not the Black Friday, Cyber Monday, but the AI Friday and the Cyber Monday. It's very much about AI and that augmented experience. And we're seeing that increase every month. But Black Friday, Cyber Monday is that key point, data point to say, yep, a lot of consumers are using AI now to shop. Heck, I used ChatGPT last night to buy all of my Christmas presents for our team. So every single team member has a unique gift based on something they did or something funny that happened to them this year. And, ChatGPT helped me do that. I said, I've got
Here to know what we're all
yeah,
getting.
I've got a sales guy that, he likes to drink champagne and he likes his first class airfares. What's a gift for him? So I basically are able to customize and get that experience in a retail situation, which is like, it's not comparable with anything else I've experienced. I can't get that kind of imagination or those ideas out of Amazon. I can't find it at my local grocery store. I can't find it at a fashion retailer. In fact, it's so much easier to find products and services using these tools now that we cannot ignore this as marketers. It is the next channel, and it gives, and beyond any other channel, it gives more power to the consumer than ever before. The internet and search and websites have given more power to the consumer over time. Like, for example, there was once a time when, if you wanted to buy a new refrigerator, you would have to go into the store and then haggle with a customer service rep. And you would have to do that because you had limited information. The stores and the sales reps had all the information. But now I can use ChatGPT to go, here's my specifications. What are the most, competitive prices? Heck, I just bought a Nintendo Switch for my kids for Christmas on Black Friday. And I walked into a store and they said, yep, this is going to be $550. And they said, well, ChatGPT tells me I can get it from this store for $100 less. Can you price match? They said no. And then I walked out of the store, so I'm able to scale up how I can actually get information about products, compare them, and that has really very little to do with the actual brands and interacting with them at all. So this definitely, Black Friday, Cyber Monday for retail definitely feels like the AI weekend, and it's definitely feeling like a new world, especially for customer experiences. It's very hard to ignore it.
Brought to you by our sponsors. If there's one theme that's followed me at every stop in my Martech career, it's trying to get good data into the hands of marketers. That's why I'm so excited to tell you about our sponsor, HighTouch, the leading composable CDP and AI decisioning platform. Companies like Domino's, Chime, Aritzia, and PetSmart trust HighTouch to power their data. And here's the kicker. 90% of customers have a real use case live in production within their first week. That means you can implement a world-class CDP in months rather than the usual years-long headache. That's why top brands choose HighTouch to personalize every customer interaction at scale. See what HighTouch can do for you at hightouch.com/MSOM. And now back to the hot seat.
Which is a perfect transition to the before and after. As in, we just hit the 3-year anniversary of ChatGPT's launch, which was November 30th, 2022. The world ablaze in a very different way. And obviously, it's no longer just a trend. It is a structural shift in how we think about things. And it's been extremely profound for Martech, business, politics, you name it. And also, it was time the quickest, fastest growing app to 100 million users, which it was quickly replaced by Threads, which is also an interesting kind of clapback, which is still the #1 free app on the Apple Store. But according to Pew this year, that 34% of adults have used ChatGPT, and that's doubled from 2023. And among adults under 30, 58%, so 2/3 of the world under age 30 are leveraging it. 60% of AI users are actually using it to search for more information. 74% of that being under 30. And so I'm curious if you've got some interesting stats, because it's not all sunshine, puppies, rainbows, and roses. And so I'm curious what you have kind of hiding up your sleeve.
Yes. So ChatGPT's 3-year anniversary. Do you remember the moment when you found out about ChatGPT?
Yeah.
What was happening?
I do.
Do you remember?
I worked at Grammarly. There were a lot of questions on, is Grammarly dead or not?
That's awesome.
Which, to be fair, I don't think so, because I still have used Grammarly Premium or Pro to correct ChatGPT, because dang M dashes. And I love M dashes, and it's ruined my favorite punctuation mark.
Mm,
But there's still a place because ChatGPT is not as
yeah,
good.
it's interesting.
It doesn't mean you need
Yeah.
both.
The way I think about this is that there's like BC and AD, right? Before Common Era and then AD, right? ChatGPT is one of those moments. It's a real specific moment in time at the end of November when that came out 3 years ago. And the transformation has been
Where were you? What
well,
were
where
your
was I? I
thoughts?
was actually really frustrated because in 3 weeks, I was heading to a European vacation for 2 months. So my wife and my kids are packing up to go to Europe. And I'm like, oh, crap. I'm going to stick around and actually analyze this. And, because at that point, I was doing a lot of analyst work in our newsletter. I was also just left my employer as well. And I was like, all right, I'm about to go start this research company. What does this mean? I wasn't necessarily surprised because I was following OpenAI very closely over those past couple years before ChatGPT launched. And every month there was something new coming out. DAL-E came out. There were other copywriting apps using AI. So I think it was like as early as 2021, that right in the middle of the NFT mania, so like everyone was talking about metaverse and NFTs. I was saying that's not the vector of change here. AI is a vector of change. Let me give you 3 startups that, are using AI to transform how you write copy or to do analysis. So there was all of these like little small blips until ChatGPT actually was that cataclysmic moment. So I wasn't super surprised. And I also had a funny moment with Scott Brinker actually at that time. We were doing a podcast, a limited series called Big Martech. And I had a big argument with him because he said that, ChatGPT, this whole AI revolution could totally change everything in Martech. And my argument at that time was that it could totally destroy Martech and actually lead to a lot of pain and suffering in the economy. And some of the stats,
I think you're both
yeah,
right.
and I actually think 3 years later, some really, really good stuff, some really, really not good stuff, right? And that's nuanced. But you've kind of talked to some of the penetration there in the market. So the fastest growing app in the App Store, only quickly replaced by Threads a year later. Majority of people are using it now. But let me give you some really interesting stats around what happened over the past 3 years. Here's a concerning one. Colombia, country of Colombia. 85% of judges are using ChatGPT to speed case processing.
Is that a good thing or
I
is that a
think that
bad
I'm not too
thing?
sure about that. I think that it definitely accelerates knowledge work, but I'm not
You're
feeling
right.
super comfortable about having it in our critical industries. Really, anything in engineering and healthcare, finance, or the judiciary or the legal system, those critical parts of society, I would say that it's tread very lightly. South Korea, one country that actually rolled back its national AI program due to accuracy issues,
Oh,
privacy
wow.
concerns, teacher workload. Like there's some countries that are totally rejecting this because it's just not good enough yet. Another one, which is also quite concerning, is that health queries are among the most common. I think it's in the top 3 most common use cases for using ChatGPT or another LLM. So a lot of people going there with their health concerns. ChatGPT is not your doctor, but people still use it.
It's not your
Yep.
therapist.
This study that came out from MIT recently, it's only based on 50 participants, but it caused a lot of noise saying that people use LLMs to, say, write an essay or to do cognitive work. When they use ChatGPT, they see a significantly lower neural connectivity, which means that their brain is not working and not processing information. and over time, that actually atrophies your ability to cognitively criticize or analyze information or process information. So there is some like, you know, smoking is bad for you, LLMs are bad for your brain type things going on as well. And then there's a really sad stat, which is just came out recently. I think OpenAI actually estimated this that more than 1 million people every week show suicidal intent when chatting with ChatGPT. Now, there have been some high profile cases in this where the parents of children or teenagers have said that ChatGPT encouraged that person to commit suicide. There's definitely been a lot of very disturbing things around that. But there's also a recognition here that there is just as many people searching for suicidal topics on the internet as well. So it's not like ChatGPT is creating all these suicidal people. I think there's definitely evidence to suggest that the platform, and not just ChatGPT, but all of them, have a role in motivating or in kind of supporting that person's decision to commit suicide. But it's not, there's a lot more suicidal people out in the world. It's more that ChatGPT is playing a role in those conversations, which is disturbing and sad and, just terrible. But that's kind of the societal impact, right? We thought we'd give you some stats on what's happening out in the bigger world around the use of this technology.
Very
Yeah.
unbalanced, to say the least. It's very reminiscent to me for what Facebook and Meta has brought up. to the world, the good and the bad. It's brought more interconnectivity, but also more loneliness and also more depression and similarly suicidal thoughts amongst certain age groups. And so it really, for me, just highlights further needs for guardrails as well as laws and regulation, which I feel like I tout rooftops on almost any topic, but regulation is required amongst all these things. That everything can be good and everything can be bad. My favorite example of that was in high school. I had a chemistry presentation, decided to go first, presented. At the very end, my teacher shared, "You didn't mention that water can be toxic levels." I got marked down a couple points. Meanwhile, every presentation afterwards verbally stated, "Oh, but of course, if you drink too much water, you could die." So it's just a perfect example of, yeah, you're supposed to drink a lot of water, but remember, at the end of the day, it could be bad for you too. Literally cause yourself to drown.
Well, a lot of sort of internet-based technologies, you have this real dichotomizing that happens, incredibly good things, incredibly terrible and saddening and sickening things. I mean, right now, the arguments are that, well, where does a role in these technologies? Well, I actually think the role sits with each person. It's your own discernment. If you're a leader in a company, how much do you embrace these tools? That comes down to personal discernment and values. For me, I find that, there are some tools like everyone, there's something tasks that I'm more than happy to give that away to ChatGPT to do for me or to set up for me because I never really want to be good in that skill. But there's some things that ChatGPT will never do for me because I want to keep those skills. It's almost the equation now. Which skills you want to keep? Which skills are you happy to let go of and atrophy? Yeah. And which ones do you want to build? And which ones do you want to grow in? And the discerning person would say, even in marketing, do we want to give our copywriting to LLMs? Do we want to give our design to LLMs? Well, do you want to get better at that? Do you want your team to get better at that? Yes or no, right? I think there is a good argument to say that, there are trade-offs with every time you interact with these LLMs, and it's figuring out which ones are the right ones. And so, but I'm going to leave you with one of these last sort of interesting stats, and it kind of goes back to our main vector of change at Black Friday, Cyber Monday, which was generative AI search, was that as a 2025 survey shows that 55% of people now use ChatGPT or Gemini for tasks previously done by Google search. And generative AI search traffic is going 165 times faster than traditional search. So traditional search has been, Google search primarily has been sitting on a 90% market share for a long time. There's no more growth there. They've won the market, but generative AI is growing extremely fast, which is exciting. And I think for all the reasons we've mentioned is also a massive mental shift for marketers as well. And about 13 million US adults, so roughly about 2-3% of the US population are using AI as their primary search tool. Again, that
this feels to me like the worries of Wikipedia when it first came out. All your teachers are like, don't use it. It's an unreliable resource. And I feel like it's in a similar vein. Like Wikipedia now is using all of those references. There's folks who really publish purposefully on Wikipedia. There's pros and cons. There's issues there too, for citations and authorship. But that's where we're at with ChatGPT. It is 2004 Wikipedia. Use with caution, but if only that caution was also leveraged by the senior leadership that are creating.
100%. It's we are in a step change, I think, right now. And LLMs, it's the before and the after, the BC and the AD of the internet infrastructure, and we're in a new world. It's exciting. Someone posted yesterday on LinkedIn, which I thought was brilliant, was that if you knew what Google search would do, how would you build your website back in 1999? If you knew what social advertising or mobile would do to the economy, how would you change your apps or your data strategy? Where would you invest your money? And I think for us right now, we're in the curve of this is a greenfield space for marketers to play in. It's actually quite exciting. And I guess we've had, if you look over the history of the internet, you had the initial internet, and then you had a platform shift with SaaS in the cloud. And then you had a shift with mobile, which was back at the start of last decade. And then we are now in the next shift, which is AI. And so it's an exciting time. I think that beyond all of everything that we've talked about, there is for marketers just a playground here of new opportunities. Like I think of companies like HubSpot that really won search back in the SaaS category. They were the best at optimizing their content for search.
Leadership and SEO.
Yep. They were SEO, the best at SEO in the SaaS industry. I think of companies like even Barack Obama's presidential campaign a long time ago, the first president to use Twitter. I think about which of the companies, my big question is which companies are going to build their online store on ChatGPT, which would be the first company to build a retailer. And they don't have a website. It's just an LLM. you know.
This is just
Yeah.
making me reminiscent of the Space Jam website where it's still stuck in 1996 or whatever year it was. And it's glorious and it's beautiful. It's a
Yep.
relic, but it is a
Yeah,
relic.
it's a product of its time, right? The world has passed it by. But we're in a very fascinating space where there's a lot of change in the market, which means a lot of opportunity, a lot of opportunities to leverage this new technology and make the most of it. So I think it's a very exciting time.
And it sounds like maybe you believe you can fly.
Yes, maybe you can believe you can fly. I love Space Jam. It's a
Sorry,
great movie.
I have to.
I actually watched Space Jam for the first time on the plane about a month ago, and I was like, Michael Jordan's acting. Like,
Where has your
I know I had the
been?
T-shirts, but I never actually got the VHS and watched the damn thing. So I watched it.
So you're like the children who wear the Ramones shirts, but never
That's
listen to
exactly
the Ramones.
right.
Got
Yeah,
it.
like
Okay.
Space Jam was a cool thing when I was a kid, but you know what? Michael Jordan's acting was pretty wooden, right? I'm looking back, I'm like, man, this guy is like a brick wall as an actor.
He can only be the goat of so many things. Like, calm down.
That was a cool collaboration, but anyway, Space Jam websites and ChatGPT, all the good things are happening. We have one question from the audience, and this actually came out of Martech World Forum, and I thought that was a really good one. Often when we talk to marketing technology leaders in enterprise, there's a constant battle with the CTO and IT. So this person's question was, I'm wanting to invest in a new personalization platform. I've done the payback and ROI analysis. I presented it to the executive team. Our CMO wants to invest, is happy to invest, but because the investment requires more IT resources, the CTO has blocked it. What can I do to get the IT on board with our vision for a modern personalization tooling?
I love this question. Multifold, because replace IT with engineering, with product, with sales. Doesn't matter what team. It's all going to be the same answer. And that is twofold. One, you need to befriend this team. And second of all, you need to speak their language. I see Martech and MOPS folks at the nexus of every company. You are the key translators. That's translating technical, that's translating non-technical. And that is translating up, translating down, translating to the side, translating, you name it, every direction. And that's why it's such a complex role and why I'm so passionate about the community, because it is so unique. There is no one Martecher alike, and that's why it's so diverse in the best way possible. So just know that your soft skills of understanding and consulting and being that consultative resource within a company is your superpower, but you have to learn how to speak their team's language, other departments' language. Granted, you get lucky sometimes and find that bridge person who helps elevate yourself and or explains things in such a way that you can better stage it. But think of it from a marketing perspective. You have to meet your audience where they're at, and otherwise you're not going to get anywhere. You're not going to make that sale, quote unquote. It's the advice I would give anyone, regardless of the team.
Yeah.
So IT is no different from Eng, and they're your friend if you let them.
Yeah, I think it's like dealing with IT, they have a different incentive set, so often they're incentivized for building capabilities, not necessarily outcomes of what those capabilities will provide. And often in these situations, the way I would go about it is I would sit down with the CTO, intensify the relationship with that person if you can, and understand their goals better, understand what they're wanting, and then take that information back and look at the blockers for that person. In an honest, good faith conversation, an executive in a business will tell you what they need and why they're concerned about a certain investment. And having that conversation means that you can just tailor it to them. It could be a bunch of reasons for why the CTO has blocked this person, but I would say get to the heart of that. And the best way to do that is actually figure out the commercial alignment. Like, okay, the CTO is building technology infrastructure. They have a budget. Yes, IT is a cost center, right? It's not a growth center, whereas marketing is the revenue and growth center of an enterprise business. And so, they're trying to minimize costs, whereas marketing is trying to invest so that they can drive better revenue. And so how can you meet the CTO in the middle to go, well, yes, you're going to have to increase your cost base. However, it's going to feed the business or make things more efficient, right? There's a very, very good reason. In most companies, the CEO or the person that's overseeing the executive team would actually step in here and say, well, this is worth the trade-off. Often the deal breaker will be the CEO, but I would not recommend going to the CEO first, okay? Don't try to circumvent your IT team, right? By
No matter the size of your company.
because that is when you're going to get them offside, right? If you have the CEO coming down on the CTO and saying, why aren't you doing this? I've heard the arguments. The CTO is not going to be your friend. So what you have to do is understand the IT's world, their risks and the concern and the investment profile, take that information and then potentially petition to have the CEO be the deal maker here or the deal breaker. But, in big investments like...
Hopefully that's not even necessary.
Yeah.
You're able to convince them because of the investment in this relationship.
Yeah, it's about trusting.
It's not easy.
Yeah, it does take time. Sure, this person is not the CMO, not on the exec team, but has got a really great strategy for a new personalization tooling and a new vision for that, right? Invest in that person. It's also equally important for the executive team to invest in the change makers in their business to transform their company and to get them to the next stage of growth. And this person here is saying that they're blocked by growth because their personalization tooling isn't good enough. And that's not modernized. And so in good faith conversations, in true understanding of the business situation, or situational awareness is the word for it, you can get past this. It's just about coordinating with the right incentives and aligning and really understanding each business's requirements as well. So great question. Keep them coming. Our website is ready for your questions. We'd love to tackle them. But for now, Jacqueline, do you have any last words on this question before we wrap up?
No, I think the combination of relationships, translation, and making sure you're aligned with the business objectives, you can't go wrong.
You can't go wrong. I love that. And you know what? You can't go wrong by subscribing to the Making Sense of Martech podcast. If you're watching on YouTube, like and subscribe. Follow us on LinkedIn. We have our LinkedIn page where you can find Jacqueline and myself on LinkedIn, posting about Martech every single day. Join our Reddit community where we have people asking questions and engaging there as well. And you can go on to themartechweekly.com, click on podcast, and then you can subscribe to get every episode and a transcript of each episode in your inbox. But for now, thanks for listening and stay curious.